Hello, and welcome to this edition of the Scales of Justice. I'm District Attorney Tim Cruz. I'm the District Attorney of Plymouth County. Joining me today is Nicole Richardi. Nicole is the Executive Director of our Plymouth County Children's Advocacy Center, also known as the CAC. She's worked for the Plymouth County District Attorney's Office for 16 years. On today's episode, we will update you on the Children's Advocacy Center. We will revisit how it works, how my office utilizes it to prosecute criminal cases involving children as victims, and how the CAC successfully trains community professionals on how to recognize and respond to the commercial sexual exploitation of children, also known as child trafficking. Prior to the 1990s, investigations regarding the sexual assault and physical abuse of children were incredibly fragmented. Child victims were required to go through multiple interviews with multiple agencies. With the creation of the Children's Advocacy Center, we've been able to streamline this process to make the entire investigation less traumatic for child victims. So Nicole, welcome.
Thank you.
You're the Executive Director of the Children's Advocacy Center in my office. Can you tell the viewers what kind of cases do you handle there?
Absolutely. We receive referrals of physical abuse, sexual abuse, exploitation, and severe neglect of any children between the ages of 3 up to 17. Thankfully, community professionals and first responders have received training from our office, so they're aware of what protocols to follow. So as soon as there's any disclosure of child abuse, they'll file a report of child abuse called a 51A with the Department of Children and Families, and then give us a call and let us know that a new case is imminent.
So mostly, where do you get your referrals from?
So most of our referrals come from the Department of Children and Families, law enforcement, hospitals, mental health agencies, and sometimes they're just concerned community members that will call us themselves and let us know about suspected child abuse that might be happening. As of last year, we received 905 referrals, and this year we're already up to 584 referrals.
I mean, it's fair to say that as the years have gone by, unfortunately, we've noticed that our numbers continue to increase in Plymouth County, am I right?
Yeah, as of last year, we were up 76%, and so far this year, I suspect that we'll be up about 90% from just over the last 2.5 years or so.
Do you attribute that to anything in particular, or is this something that just has happened here?
I think it can be attributed to a few different things. So we've really done a lot of work with the Department of Children and Families to strengthen our relationships. I think that's been a major factor, and also we've done an extensive amount of community outreach and education. So we trained about 1,800 people last year on how to recognize child abuse and indicators and how to respond. So I think that's all coming back to us now. So it's actually a good thing because people typically get upset when they hear that our numbers are up, but I actually consider it to be a good thing because that just means that the kids that are being abused out there are actually getting the services that they need that we would have not noticed or have come to our attention previously.
So as a result of a lot of the training that you and your staff do in our community, people now know what to look for.
Absolutely.
And so now it's right in front of them. Maybe before they wouldn't have noticed that, but now that's something they see based upon the training, and they make a report, and then that's where the real work begins for us. Am I correct?
Absolutely. When we talk to professionals and tell them what the indicators of child abuse are, they often say that there were children in the past that they missed because they just weren't aware of what the indicators and red flags are, and now they know and they're making those reports, so the kids are getting to us, which is a good thing.
So you gather information from the referral, and once you get that, what's the benefit of utilizing the CAC once you get all that information?
So as you mentioned before, prior to the 90s, child abuse cases were incredibly fragmented. Now what happens is children are referred to Children's Advocacy Centers, or CACs, as we've been saying, and CACs offer a streamlined approach with a multidisciplinary team response. And everything is set up to be really child and family friendly. So when they come, it's not a sterile environment like a police department. We put a lot of care into how the walls are painted and having comfortable couches, so children and families feel really comfortable when they come to CACs. And in fact, because it's nationally recognized as being best practices to handle child abuse investigations, there are over 800 CACs nationally, and they're popping up in Israel, Canada, again, because everybody acknowledges that it's the most trauma-informed way to move forward with these investigations.
So as you've been in the office for 16 years, so
Yep.
You've certainly seen a lot of the growing pains that we've undergone with our CAC. And I think you'd agree that one of the biggest things that occurred for us within the last decade was partnering up with a local agency, private agency, BAMSI, to make sure we can get the building that we need in order to keep that going. Am I correct?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, when we partnered with BAMSI, we were able to expand our services to include mental health and medical services for kids. Prior to that, we were just located, as you know, in the Family Protection Unit, and we were really only able to offer forensic interviews at that time.
Yeah. So now we have really one-stop shopping, really, for all the family members, the non-offending family members anyways, that come to our CAC, but most importantly, focusing on the child, his or herself, and making sure that we can try to help them as best as we can.
Yes, absolutely. And in 2014, we became a fully accredited center by the National Children's Alliance.
And that took a lot of work, I know.
It did, yep.
And it took a long time and a lot of work, and that's not something that's easy to be done. I congratulate you and all your staff for doing that, because I know what it entailed and how challenging it was, especially for a small unit like ours.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
You had mentioned that the forensic interview process. What does that entail?
So forensic interviewers receive specialized training. They have to go out of state to receive that training. It's 40 hours and very intensive. I did it myself back in 2003. So essentially what happens is when a child comes to the CAC, they're greeted by the forensic interviewer. The interviewer sits down and explains everything that's going to happen and makes sure that the child and family are comfortable with the process. And then the interviewer will go into the interview room with the child, and there's a team that watches from a room upstairs. So the people that are part of our multidisciplinary team are a police detective, a victim witness advocate, an assistant district attorney, an investigator from the Department of Children and Families, and also our pediatric sexual assault nurse examiner. So they all watch from a room upstairs via closed-circuit TV as the interview speaks with the child downstairs. And then as soon as the interview is over with, the family comes up, meets with the team of professionals, and has an opportunity to ask any questions that they have about next steps or services. And then if the child wants to come up and meet the team, they can as well. And we always ask the child's permission for everything. So we never make them come upstairs. We never even force them to engage in the interview process. We want to make sure that it's really trauma-informed.
And that's really one of the most important things, really, is really the one-stop shopping for the child, because prior to really the CAC getting up and running, it wouldn't be unusual for a child to disclose, say at school, maybe to a school teacher, and the school teacher then would go tell the principal, and the principal would come down, and the child would tell the principal at that time. And then maybe the principal would say, well, get the school nurse. And the school nurse would come down, and the child would disclose again, at which point someone would say, call the police, and the police would come. And I think that what we were seeing is that the children, after a while, like we were going around talking to other people about our CAC, I mean, imagine the most violent and vicious thing that's ever happened to you, and you having to tell it over and over again. And so we saw that the kids were not really going forward with a lot of these cases, and even worse than that, not really getting the services that they needed because of the trauma that they had, and really some of the trauma that was induced by the continuation of talking about the event. And that's why training our forensic interviewers and working in conjunction with that team in the closed circuit TV, in my opinion, is really the key to making sure we can help that child and that family as best as we can.
Absolutely, and the interviewers are trained to ask non-leading, forensically sound questions so that those interviews can be held up in court. Because we want children to be able to tell their story in their own words.
And we also, obviously, we want to make sure we deal with the individuals and hold the individuals who are hurting our children accountable in a criminal prosecution. But we also understand that many of our cases, the child's not ready to disclose, the child's not ready to go forward in a courtroom setting, but we still provide other health services other than the forensic interview to try to help that child, so that perhaps what we can do is get in front of these cycles that we see, whether they be cycles of domestic violence, cycles of child abuse. That's really what this is important about, is stopping this child, who is a victim right now, stopping the cycle of abuse so that that child doesn't turn into a perpetrator down the road.
Absolutely. And the way that we do that is by offering medical and mental health services on site. So as far as the mental health consultant goes, they're an employee of BAMSI, and when the family comes in, if they're interested, they will speak with that mental health consultant and discuss what services would be appropriate for them as far as mental health goes, and then the mental health consultant will make referrals to community providers that are right in the family's region, so something that's close to home and convenient for them. And we also have our pediatric sexual assault nurse practitioner. She's an employee of the Department of Public Health, and she's absolutely invaluable. So she is able to meet with families and children as well immediately following the interview. And she can offer an opportunity for them to just ask questions, because a lot of children have so many questions about their bodies after they've been abused. Some kids think that just by walking around that people can look at them and tell that they've been abused. So she's a great resource for those kids to ask the questions, and also she can do a wellness check with them and right up into a forensic medical exam, and everything happens at our site on the same day.
I mean, that's great. I mean, the services that you provide really, I think, make a big difference in these kids as they proceed down that road in trying to help them and help their family members. And the mental health especially is something that is going to get in front of, as we said before, the next cycle. When we were talking a little bit earlier, you talked about the kinds of cases you handle, and you were talking about exploitation. Can you explain to the viewers what is sexual exploitation?
Absolutely. So we refer to sexual exploitation as the commercial sexual exploitation of children. Some people call it trafficking, some people call it domestic minor trafficking. We refer to it as CSEC. So that's when we say CSEC, that's what we mean. And we define CSEC as any child under the age of 18 who engages, offers to engage in, or agrees to engage in any sexual conduct in exchange for food, shelter, clothing, money, or anything of value. And these children are more previously sometimes referred to as child prostitutes, and that's certainly not what we refer to them as anymore, because they are victims of child sexual abuse.
And these kids, I mean, the CSEC stuff is something that's relatively new versus child abuse per se. I know a lot of people say to me, well, we don't have that here in Plymouth County. We don't have child exploitation of children. And that, unfortunately, is not the case. We do have it.
Correct. We do have it, and people are absolutely shocked to hear the numbers that we have, our statistics. So last year we had 50 cases of CSEC right here in Plymouth County, and so far this year we've had 50 cases. So those numbers are absolutely exploding, and I think, again, it's because that population of victims is very much under-recognized. So it happens all the time, and people have no idea that it's happening. And I think most people think of the movie Taken when they think of trafficking, not something that happens here. And throughout the U.S., it's estimated that approximately 100 to 300,000 children are at risk for CSEC here in the United States every year.
And once again, this is something that to us is relatively new, and that's why it was really important to develop a protocol as to what do you do when you find one of these cases. And that's why I know we've done trainings with law enforcement, with police officers, with schools, trying to get information out to the individuals in our community. And I forget the number that you've trained in the last couple of years. It's something like 1,500 or 1,600 people.
Yep.
It's really amazing. And once again, that information that is brought to the attention of the professionals, either in the schools or on the streets, that's what's helping us get this information to try to get, once again, in front of this problem of what's going on with these kids.
Right. So essentially what happens with these kids, how they end up becoming victims, is typically about 70 to 90% of these kids have some kind of abuse history. And what happens is they leave home, they run away, and pimps or recruiters will go to places where kids typically go, so malls, bus stations, etc. And these people will approach the child and they'll try to befriend them. And if it's a man or male, they might say, "Oh, you look beautiful. What are you doing here?" And if it's a female, she might say, "Oh, I have this great guy. Come with me." So the child is very vulnerable, trusts them, and then goes with them. And at first, to the child, it seems probably like a pretty good way to move forward, as in contrast to what they've been experiencing with this, different types of abuse at home. But eventually the relationship changes. So it starts out with them providing, maybe food for them, bringing them out to dinner, buying them clothes. But at some point, the pimp will turn around and say to the child, "I've been paying for all these things for you, now you owe me." And the child is forced into a life of exploitation.
So it's a grooming situation, much like what we see internet predators who will go online, pretend there's something that they're not. They'll pretend they're a 13-year-old girl talking to a 13-year-old boy, when in actuality they're grown men, and they lure these kids in, extrapolating information, getting more and more, developing a bond of trust. And then what we see, rather than being on the internet now, in the world of CSEC are these individuals who are picking up these kids, and lots of these kids, they come from difficult backgrounds themselves. They come from dysfunctional families, which is why a lot of them have run away from where they're at.
Right.
And they're really ripe for the picking for some of these guys.
Yeah, a lot of these kids, absolutely. The majority, I would say, are. We've seen some kids that don't have a history, but most of them do. So yeah.
Is there anything that viewers can do to help identify these kids in order to get them the safety and services that they need?
Yeah, we believe that victim identification is one of the most important ways that viewers can help. So red flags for CSEC are kids that are running away frequently with no explanation as to where they've been, kids that are showing up at school or other places with, say, a Coach pocketbook or Gucci jewelry, or you know, hair done, nails done, things that their family wouldn't have the means to provide them, and all of a sudden now they have all of these new things. So that should be a red flag to someone that there's something going on with that child. Also, you might find kids with large amounts of money. It's not their money, it's the pimp's money, but that's another red flag. And then excessive internet activity on dating websites, so Meet Me is a big one right now. So those are some of the indicators, and also tattoos. So usually if you speak with a teenager who has a tattoo, they're more than excited to tell you all about why they got the tattoo, what it means to them. But if you see a child that has a tattoo that they don't want to explain and that they seem ashamed of, that's an indicator that there could be something there. And typically these kids, well, nationally the average age of entry into the commercial sex industry is about 12 to 14 years old, and we're seeing kids about that age, about 13, 14. So that's what we're seeing in Plymouth County.
So we began doing our initiative here to deal with the CSEC, which consisted of training to all these other different entities that we deal with anyways, you know, to once again develop a protocol for identifying the kids, making sure that we can get the services that we can, if we can get them out of those terrible relationships. Is there anything more about the initiative you can tell our viewers right now?
Yeah, so we rolled out our initiative in September of 2017 because of the growing need, and we were really fortunate to receive a federal grant from Massachusetts that was obtained by DCF, My Life, My Choice, and the Suffolk County Children's Advocacy Center. And the goal of the grant was to expand capacity to respond to CSEC victims in our community. So through that initiative, we were able to train over 450 community professionals specifically on our CSEC protocols. We were able to create our CSEC protocol, which was a combined effort from about 20 different community agencies and local, federal, and state partners. So that was really a huge effort. We also now have a CSEC coordinator who's designated, that is housed at the CAC, and her job specifically is to respond to CSEC cases and really give them the time and the energy they deserve, because they're really, really complicated cases, also because a lot of these kids don't see themselves as victims.
If somebody believes that they know that a child is being exploited, what do they do? Where do they go?
So the first thing they should do, as in all child abuse cases, is file a child abuse report called a 51A, which I mentioned earlier. You can find more information about reporting either on our website or the Department of Children and Families website. And if there's ever an emergency, folks should call the police first and foremost. That's the most important thing. As far as speaking with the child themselves, we ask that people engage in what we call a minimal facts interview. So who, what, when, where, and that's all we need to know. We don't want people extensively interviewing children because it can compromise the criminal investigation and also be incredibly traumatic for kids. So those things are really important. And some questions to ask the child if you suspect that they may be a victim of CSEC is, how are they able to survive, either when they're on the run and when they're out on the streets, and then also, did they ever have to do anything they didn't want to do, or were they ever forced to do something they didn't want to do? So that's a good way of starting that conversation without directly asking them if they've been a victim of exploitation, because if you ask that question, the answer is going to be no.
Can you describe for our viewers, what are some ways that you can prevent child abuse and sex offenders from hurting our kids? What do we need to let parents know? We train professionals, but what do we need to let parents know?
So awareness is absolutely key to combating this issue. Child abuse is allowed to pervade our society because it happens under a veil of secrecy. So it happens in secret. People don't want to talk about it because it makes them feel really uncomfortable, and it continues. So parents need to be aware of the physical and emotional signs of abuse and talk to other parents about that and get the word out so people know what indicators to look for. And parents also should be aware of who their children are spending time with. They should pick group settings over one-on-one settings, and just be really well-versed in the organizations that their child are attending, or different programs and such. So they need to make sure that different organizations have proper mandated reporting policies, and also that they're doing extensive background checks. And I think one of the key things is that kids need to know that they can go to their parents and talk to them about anything that ever makes them feel uncomfortable.
What are some of the behaviors of a child predator that kids need to be aware of? What can we tell them?
So unfortunately, child predators are drawn to positions that afford them access to children. So sometimes it can be school personnel, clergy, coaches. They seek out those positions. And unfortunately, 90% of child predators are people that the children know and that are trusted. So they're either family members or other people. Because if you think about it, you wouldn't leave your child with someone that you thought was, for lack of a better term, creepy or strange. These are people that we walk amongst every day, unfortunately, and they engage in grooming behavior. So what they'll do is they will try to speak to the kids, get them to gain their trust, and essentially sometimes they buy them things, they lavish attention, gifts, anything like that to try to get the child to like them.
Telling kids or talking to kids about this has got to be pretty scary for them.
Mm-hmm.
How do you walk that fine line of making kids aware without really scaring them?
Yeah, I look at it as having a safety conversation. So you talk to kids about seatbelts, you talk to them about wearing helmets. To me, it's essentially the same thing, although a little bit more uncomfortable. But parents should let their kids, again, know that they will never get in trouble for talking to them about anything. And if their child seems uncomfortable with an adult or even another child, they should be asking them why. And parents should always explore the differences between secrets and surprises. That's really, really important. Parents should also let kids know that their bodies are private and what parts of their bodies are off limits. And that's essentially some of the best ways that parents can talk to their kids without making it too scary.
Yeah. If anybody in the audience finds themselves in that difficult situation of having a child disclose to them an abuse to them, can you give them some tips about what they should do at that point?
Mm-hmm. So they should always tell the child that they're very brave for coming forward. They should thank them for letting them know that something was happening to them. And then they should tell the child that they're going to go ahead and let people know that do this every single day, and they're going to get them some help. So you shouldn't ever make promises to kids about what's going to happen, because these kids have already been lied to and misled. So just always be really careful about what kinds of things you're telling them in that moment. And one of the most important things is to stay calm, because disclosure is a process. It's usually not an event. So the information comes out in pieces. And typically a child is looking for your reaction to see if it's okay for them to talk more about it. So trying to stay calm is one of the most important things. And as I've said before, you're always going to want to file a 51A and call the police if it's an emergency.
And staying calm has got to be the most challenging thing for an adult. If you're hearing that something's happened to a child you know or a child you love that has been hurt by somebody, that's really going to take a lot of courage to be able to walk that straight line during that time period. It's going to be a real challenge for them.
Absolutely, and we've had community professionals that have reported abuse that have been sitting with a child who was disclosing and started crying or getting really upset. And that's one of the quickest ways to get a child to shut down. So we completely understand and acknowledge that that's so incredibly difficult for adults, and it may be triggering for them as well, especially if they have an abuse history. But if you think about what's best for the child, it really is to stay calm in that moment, and then to make sure you get yourself some help with that afterwards.
So step one after a disclosure is
to, well, if there's an emergency, you're going to call the police.
right.
So
Always call 911.
always call 911, exactly. So for instance, if you're a school professional and the child discloses to you and the perpetrator is the dad who's about to pick the child up at school, you're going to want to call the police right away and get some help with that. And then once you're in a safe place, you can call the Department of Children and Families, make that report. And then we also ask the community professionals give us a call as well. It's not mandated that you call us, but it's very helpful so that we can start working on the case right away.
If viewers are looking for more guidance or they have questions or they want to learn more, what should they do?
So they can give us a call anytime. The CAC is open normal business hours, anytime from 8:30 to 4:30, and we all have confidential voicemail, so you can call and leave us a message if you have any concerns. We're not emergency responders, so we're not going to come right out and respond in that moment, but we can really be helpful and be a resource. So we get calls from everywhere. We get calls from school adjustment counselors, Sometimes even DCF calls us, just, you know, with questions about what to do, because again, like you had mentioned before, there's nothing more panic-inducing than hearing a disclosure of abuse.
And once again, the most important thing, if the viewers believe the child is in imminent danger, do not wait, do not hesitate. Don't even call the DA's office first. Call your local police department to get them involved. It's incredibly important to stop that process where that child is going at that point, and we'll deal with the aftermath after that.
Absolutely. Safety first is what I always say.
If anybody would like to hear more about the information about our CAC protocols, CSAC, or our mandated reporting, what can they do?
So they can give us a call. So myself and our education and outreach coordinator are always out in the community giving trainings. We train at schools, we train at Boys and Girls Clubs, we train at law enforcement, for police, you name it, we're there. Anyone who will listen to us will come and see. So you can give us a call, someone will come out to your agency, or you can come to the CAC and we'll give you a tour right on site there and go over our protocols, and we can train on mandated reporting, Child Abuse 101, indicators, CSAC, or anything related to that.
Nicole, I want to thank you for the update in the CAC and also for covering the topic of commercial sexual exploitation of children and the great job that the CAC does every day. It's great information for everybody to have and for everybody to be aware of. And you people over there do an incredible amount of work and have saved so many kids. It's something I'm proud to be affiliated with, so I want to thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Well, that concludes this episode of The Scales of Justice. I hope you've enjoyed today's show. If you'd like more information regarding the Children's Advocacy Center, please visit our website. You can access it at cac.plymouthda.com. Thank you for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you again for our next episode. I'm Plymouth County District Attorney Tim Cruz. On any given day, any one of us could be a victim of crime. My primary job is to protect victims. If you or anyone that you know has been victimized, I urge you to contact my office so that we can pursue justice and also get you the support and services that you may need. Advocates are available to assist you. Please call us at 1-508-584-8120. To learn more about victims' rights, visit our website. Thank you.